evening, everybody, and welcome to Carving It Up Live right here on YouTube, as well as on Facebook, Twitch, and on X. I am Bryson Carver. It is great to be with you on a Wednesday. Let me adjust this camera a little bit. You know, sometimes as my hair grows out, folks, and where I got this like flip, sometimes it cuts off my head, which makes thumbnails more difficult when I try and put my big head on it or my face or whatever. It's hard with the carving up background, but appreciate everybody for stopping by. We've got a ton to talk about in the world of NFL football, college football. We've got kind of under the radar because the NFL playoffs are coming up fast and furious. We've got two college football playoff games tomorrow night and on Friday night between Miami and Ole Miss, and then between Oregon and Indiana. Very, very excited about both. I'll predict both at the end of today's show. Thus far, the predictions on carving it up for the college football playoff have gone relatively well. Basically, just don't pick the SEC unless you get Ole Miss versus Georgia, I guess. And I say as a SEC guy, it's been a bad last 3 years, and we did a segment about that last week on the fall of what used to be the greatest conference in college football, but no longer. We'll get to that later in the show. Bryson's best 10, the last Bryson's best 10 teams, NFL teams of the season. We'll do Bryson's best, I guess, 8 next week when the last 8 teams are left. And then after that, usually when we're down to 4, we do like top 10 players in conference championship weekend. We do the same for the Super Bowl. But as far as top 10 teams, it's the last one we'll do all season long. So tune in for that later on. My last MVP ladder, y'all already heard me say on Monday that Stafford would be my league MVP, slightly over Drake May. But who would be my top 5? Who, to me, if I had an MVP vote, would get 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on my personal ballot? I'll reveal that later in the show. Also, one of my favorite segments to do of the year, and we do this at this exact same time, the midweek show right before the playoffs every year. Playoff weaknesses. We've got 14 NFL teams whose goals and dreams of winning a Super Bowl is still alive. Now, obviously, the Seahawks is a little bit more realistic than the Panthers, but it's basically what's the number one reason each of the 14 teams will not win the Super Bowl. We will discuss that. Each of the 14, AFC, NFC. Very, very excited about that. My guy, Tyler Reddington from the Grid Network is in the comments. Let's go, Bryson. Appreciate you for stopping by the show, Tyler. By the way, Tyler's a big Mavs fan. I saw a report saying that the Mavs are like, it's like a foregone conclusion that they're going to trade Anthony Davis. Tyler, just if you can talk to your guys in Dallas to not trade Anthony Davis to Golden State, I don't want that problem. I don't want coin flip Davis on the Golden State Warriors. We got enough issues as is. We need to move Kuminga before we can think about anything. So we don't want Anthony Davis. Let your people in Dallas know that, okay? I appreciate if you did that, Tyler. But shout out to him. Shout out to everybody at the Grid Network. Let's get started with the news that broke yesterday afternoon. But first, it felt kind of inevitable after Sunday night's game. Heck, it feels like it's been coming for a few weeks now. John Harbaugh has been fired by the Baltimore Ravens after 18 seasons with the franchise. He obviously won a Super Bowl back in 2012. That was the Joe Flacco team. Remember, is Joe Flacco elite? Question. Ray Lewis's final year, that team had Terrell Suggs and Ed Reed at the end of his run, and God rest his soul, the late, great Jacoby Jones. I'm praising the Ravens too much to be a Steelers fan, but that was an excellent team that went on an incredible run to win the title, the second in franchise history for Baltimore. They moved on from him yesterday. And the writing was on the wall for this. So first of all, I called it from the jump back in week 1. Matter of fact, I even made a short clip on IG, TikTok, IG, TikTok, and YouTube. It's out now, where I kind of went back and looked at the clip of, back in week 1 after they blew that 15-point lead to Buffalo. I said, I'm out. I've seen enough. This is not necessarily with Harbaugh per se, but this Ravens team cannot win a Super Bowl, regardless of how talented the roster is, and this was before the injuries, regardless of how great Lamar is in the regular season. We know he has his concerns in the postseason. John Harbaugh, Super Bowl winning coach. If that's in you, if you have a recent history of blowing double-digit leads, of which the Ravens lead the NFL since 2022 in blowing double-digit leads, I believe the number's 14, and you do that to start the year against a team you lost to in the playoffs, that I can't trust you with the breadth of the season, and certainly in the postseason, which the Ravens will not even be competing at this point. And when I think about the Harbaugh era, the first thing you think of is that Super Bowl, because you should. He's a Super Bowl winning coach. But in recent years, since that title, let's do a quick sort of recap about what the last decade plus has been for the Baltimore Ravens. When you consider you win the Super Bowl 2012, between 2013 and, I guess, mid-2018, when Lamar Jackson takes over as the starter in his rookie season. Do you know the Ravens in that span were a game under 500? So 2013 missed the playoffs after winning the Super Bowl. 2014, they beat the Steelers, go to New England. They don't blow a 14-point lead one time. They blow a 14-point lead twice. to the eventual champion Patriots. Who knows? Maybe Baltimore could have won a Super Bowl that year, if not for the great Tom Brady, and if not for some mistakes on the part of Baltimore. You had to do something wrong to blow two touchdown leads twice, I guess. A lot of twos there. 2015, I believe they went 5-11. Flacco had an injury. 2016, this to me is where it kind of starts, where it's, okay, how well does this team play situationally? And before we go in from the 2016 on, here's what I'll say. Because we hear all the time, whether it's quarterbacks, whether it's coaches, about winning the big game. Whether it's a playoff game, whether it's specifically a conference championship game or a Super Bowl, that's in the NFL and in college, winning a conference championship. In the NBA, winning a finals or winning a big game 7. Same in baseball, winning the big game. What we really mean by that, if you really want to get to the heart of it, how did you win the game? Or more notably, how great were you in the biggest moments? In other words, can we look back on you and say, even if you were to somehow lose a big game, hey, so-and-so did his part. I would argue Josh Allen, as special as he is still living off. I think the greatest thing that happened in Josh Allen's career was that loss to Kansas City back in 2021 when he was out of this world amazing. Remember the 13-second game? That was the last time Josh touched the ball. Mahomes got 2 possessions. Based on the old overtime rules, Josh Allen never got the ball again. After the game, the man lost. We were like, he's better than Mahomes. He's still living off of that. And Josh has been great in other situations since. For the Baltimore Ravens, that's why I bring that up. For the Baltimore Ravens, 2016, it's Christmas Day. On the road in Pittsburgh, they needed, if I remember the situation correctly, they needed to beat the Steelers. And as far as I remember, they needed, to win Week 17, and they would have taken the AFC North. Big Ben throws a slant to Antonio Brown down inside the 5-yard line. Steelers are out of timeouts. AB's going to get stopped short. Last second, stretches the ball over the goal line. Touchdown. Steelers win the division inside of 10 seconds left against Baltimore. 2017, even worse than this. So the Ravens aren't going to win the division. If the Steelers won the division in 2017, they were the 2 seed that year. Ravens have a home game against the Andy Dalton, Marvin Lewis Bengals, notorious for underachieving. All they have to do is on 4th down and 12 from midfield, get 1 stop. And Andy Dalton to Tyler Boyd happens, and that's how the Buffalo Bills got in the playoffs for the first time in 18 years. Ravens go home because they couldn't get a stop at home on 4th down and 12 to Andy Dalton. Not to Big Ben, not to Brady or one of these other great AFC quarterbacks. Andy Dalton, God bless him, but not special. 2017, before Lamar Jackson takes over, the Ravens were 4-5. Like, it was kind of coming down the tracks where it's, dang, is Harbaugh going to keep his job? Like, he was not on as hot of a seat then as he was at points this year before he ended up losing his job, yesterday. But the signs were, the writing was on the wall. Missed playoffs. Blown playoff leads in 2014. Missed playoffs. And then you might be missing the playoffs again. Lamar Jackson takes over. You get hot down the stretch. Win the division. Lose the playoff game, that's fine. 2019. Number 1 seed, 14-2. And you get absolutely boat raced by the Tennessee Titans. The 6 seed, 9-win Titans in round 1. And listen, I'm not saying any of the following to take blame for Lamar Jackson. None of this. I've been hard on Lamar Jackson's playoff resume. But some of this has to fall on the coach as well for how slow those Ravens teams have started in playoff games. 2020. Got the ball on the goal line, 3rd quarter. Touchdown ties the game against Buffalo. This one's on Lamar. Lamar Jackson throws a pick 6. And that's basically game. 2021. Missed the playoffs. 2022. You got the ball on the goal line. You're going to take the lead over Cincinnati in the second half. Tyler Huntley fumbles. Sam Hubbard goes 100 yards, and that's basically game there. 2023, you're the 1 seed. The prohibitive favorite. You're crushing all the great teams in the regular season. I remember talking about that on the show. They're mauling these legit playoff teams. And you score 10 points at home against the Kansas City Chiefs as a favorite to win the game. Last year, start slow again in the playoffs against Buffalo. And of course, Mark Andrews drops the 2-point conversion that would have tied it. And then this year, the Tyler Luke missed kick. And throughout the season, other situational blunders. The blown 10-point lead to New England. The blown 15-point lead to Buffalo. At what point does that fall on the head coach? And at what point does it fall on the head coach? When reports are coming out, and I had alluded to this, not as much as others, but I'd said, when the hit piece, because that's what it was. when the hit piece on Lamar Jackson comes out in the Baltimore Sun last week, yeah, he's lazy, plays video games, falls asleep in meetings. Not even saying some of that stuff is just blatantly false necessarily. But that was a weird time for that to come out before the biggest game of the Ravens season on the road with the division on the line against your arch rival Pittsburgh Steelers. It's a weird time for that to come out. Somebody within the Baltimore Ravens had to leak that, and according to multiple former players, I think RG3 talked about this, like RG3 used to be Lamar's back in the Baltimore. Those guys love Lamar Jackson in the locker room. Swear by him. So a player didn't leak it. Who was it? A trainer? Did a trainer go to the Baltimore Sun and be like, you know what? I'm in these team meetings. I'm seeing Lamar Jackson dozing off while John Harbaugh speaking to the team. Chances are it probably came from a notable head coach, John Harbaugh. When Ian Rappaport comes out yesterday and says, yeah, the relationship wasn't the best. There's an old saying in football. You can lose games. You cannot lose the locker room. I don't know if we don't know enough now because we're barely 24 hours post Harbaugh firing. I don't know if he lost the locker room in Baltimore. I think we can pretty confidently say he lost Lamar Jackson. And that's kind of a non-starter. If you lose the quarterback, it feels like by extension you lose parts of the team. And it can happen in a dime. Think about a Doug Peterson who kind of flamed out in Jacksonville, but Doug Peterson wins a Super Bowl in Philly, wins a playoff game the next year, makes the playoffs the year after that, sits Jalen Hurts. Remember, he sat Jalen Hurts for, I don't even remember who the backup was in that game against Washington. Jason Kelce and some of the other Eagles veterans like, what the heck are we doing? Lost the locker room. He gets fired. Sirianni comes in, and it's been pretty successful in Philadelphia the last 5 years. It can happen fast. And to those that are saying, man, this is a risky proposition moving on from John Harbaugh, I would say two things about that. Number one, this whole, he's good. You're never going to be bad with him. Is that not exactly what my Pittsburgh Steelers have dealt with for the last, 9 years? Is that not why you have Steelers fans, hello, myself among them, who say, yeah, if you lose another playoff game, 6 in a row, right? 7 in a row. This one at home against Houston with extra rest. DK Metcalf come back. If you lose that game, okay, Tomlin's 1-0 in the last 9 years. At what point are we going to have to expect more from your coach? Well, he's not bad. Well, is that the standard in Pittsburgh or in Baltimore? 2 championship-level organizations? That's number one. And number two, John Harbaugh is a successful coach. John Harbaugh has been a good coach throughout his career. He comes from the Andy Reid tree, which really comes from the Mike Holmgren tree, which is probably the greatest in NFL history, at least post-merger. John Harbaugh's going to get a job. There's a reason that, 45 minutes after he was fired, Schefter comes out and said, yeah, there are teams that are currently employing a head coach that are calling John Harbaugh, which makes you think, maybe Miami Dolphins, maybe there were some rumors about Philadelphia. I don't think Sirianni gets booted. Maybe Buffalo. If they lose their first playoff game, is Sean McDermott on the hot seat? And this kind of turns into a Kevin Stefanski question, which I'll talk about in about 15, 20 minutes or so, but more so of a, hey, let's wait until some of these better jobs potentially open up. I would be shocked if John Harbaugh is not employed in the 2026 NFL season as a head coach, whether it's in Atlanta, the Giants. Vegas feels like they want to go for more of a younger upstart coach, which John Harbaugh is in his mid-60s, not playing ageism whatsoever, but you want kind of like a fresh start. I imagine Tom Brady, who's going to be part of the head coach search in Vegas, would like that. Or maybe he would like the proven head coach like John Harbaugh. The point is, when a good coach and a successful organization part ways, all we have to do is look back to Andy Reid. Now, I think Andy Reid's a better coach than John Harbaugh. But Andy Reid, there came a point in time, the Eagles were underachieving. They would come up short in the playoffs. The McNabb thing kind of evaporated and fell apart in those last few years. Then you got Michael Vick and Deshaun Jackson and Shady McCoy and like this great team. And you're just not getting to the next level. And eventually Andy Reid kind of loses the locker room, gets fired after a bad year in 2012 in Philly. Feels like 2 minutes later, he's having a press conference in Kansas City as their new head coach. And how have the Eagles been since? Won a couple Super Bowls, been another one. Eagles are a well-run franchise. Jeffrey Lurie, the owner. Howie Roseman, the GM. Andy Reid's done pretty well for himself, too, to say the very least. So when a successful company and a successful employee part ways, there doesn't necessarily have to be a loser. Like, there's not a loser in the Andy Reid Philadelphia Eagles split. They both won. Andy got 3 Super Bowls. By the way, got one against Philly. Eagles have gotten 2 Super Bowls, got one against Andy. Ravens, and listen, I say this as a Steelers fan. Ravens are a top-notch organization. They draft well, good GM, good ownership in the case of Steve Bisciotti. They still have Lamar Jackson. I don't know if you heard, but he's one of the 5 best quarterbacks in the sport. Down year, I get it, but everyone's allowed to have a down year. It happens. Harbaugh's going to be fine. Harbaugh's going to have success elsewhere, no doubt about it. And the Ravens will be fine in the long run. And, in large part because this now goes to far and away the most attractive head coaching destination. Vegas is just because you've got the first pick, new quarterback, Brady's part of the front office now. Like, there's the allure of that, like building something from the ground up. But there's also, it's very similar to Green Bay when they moved on from Mike McCarthy after 2018, where it's 2019, we're not sure how we feel about the Packers as it relates to Super Bowl contention, but you got Aaron Rodgers in his prime. Like, it's not a terrible job. You got Lamar Jackson in his prime. So I think it was all said and done. Harbaugh will be fine. The Ravens will be fine. But it was time to part ways. Again, that's frankly how I feel about Tomlin and my Steelers. That if the Steelers lose on Monday Night Football and the reports say Tomlin could walk away, please do. Both Tomlin and the Steelers need a fresh start. Both Harbaugh and the Ravens needed a fresh start. So, given the fact that you've got 7 head coach openings, I guess technically 6, because the Ravens are going to hire Harbaugh back, and you could potentially have more, depending on what happens this weekend in the AFC in particular. I think they'll both be fine in the long run when it's all said and done. Tyler was referring to what I was saying earlier about the Mavs not trading Anthony Davis to the Warriors. He said, "I'll make the call." Please do, because we don't want Anthony Davis in Golden State. Okay, he's injury prone. He's unreliable. He's inconsistent. And by the way, he's old now. The Warriors can make some legit acquisitions. We can trade Murphy with the Pelicans. Michael Porter Jr. with the Nets would be 2 excellent. You're not getting both. One of those 2 guys would be an excellent acquisition. Or maybe if you want to get really greedy, Michael Porter Jr. and Nick Claxton. Hey, I'll be happy with that. Yeah, we don't want Anthony Davis. But again, like it's with Lamar Jackson, I think it's just, or not Lamar Jackson, with the Baltimore Ravens, it's just because, like, why do we have to make it to a point where, it's just an absolute disaster, that then you fire it, a guy? You're going to wait until the bridge collapses, so to speak, before you move on from somebody. Well, what if you be proactive? What if you get out ahead of this? What if you look within the organization, say, the coach and quarterback really don't get along? And by the way, if you look at NFL history, coaches and quarterbacks that win a Super Bowl together, they do it in the first 5 years. Lamar Jackson, John Harbaugh have been together 8. It's time. It's okay. It's time. Both will be fine in the long run. I'll be completely honest with you, and this is not an insult to John Harbaugh. As a Steelers fan, as a guy who saw his team survive by the skin of our teeth to win the AFC North on Sunday night, I was kind of hoping they kept John Harbaugh. I was kind of hoping for a little bit of dissent in Baltimore. I was hoping for, are they going to send Lamar Jackson? Because they move. If Lamar Jackson gets moved somehow, it's like, okay, it's the Steelers division to lose for the next 10 years. Because Burrow's in dysfunctional Cincinnati for now. The Browns are the Browns, and Baltimore would be without a quarterback. So this is the right move for both sides. And I'll talk more about Kevin Stefanski in about 10 minutes or so. I did want to shift to college football. This is an all NFL and college football show. We'll have predictions for the 2 semifinal games later on. So this Damon Williams story is really, really, I think, going to be, I don't want to make it more than what it is, but it feels like it could be a little bit of a turning point in the transfer portal era. So for those that maybe haven't followed the story, Damon Williams, really talented young quarterback, on our show on the Grid Network, the Saturday Morning Tailgate, which will be airing a new episode, Saturday Morning Tailgate, this Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern, 7 a.m. Pacific time, myself, Tim Barnard, and Arthur Hurst, although I think this Saturday it's just going to be me and Arthur. Anytime we've talked about Washington, I'm like, hey, y'all need to keep your eye on this Damon Williams kid. Really talented, young guy, really athletic, can throw the football effectively. Like, he's a nice player to watch. Maybe a Heisman candidate in 2026. Who knows? And he initially, because we're in the early stages of the transfer portal period right now, he signed an extension to stay with the Washington Huskies. So he said, I want to stay in Washington. And then in large part because Texas Tech paid their quarterback to stay about $5 million. And I think Damon Williams signed for about $2 million. He's like, hey, I'm better than, excuse me. Hey, I'm better than this guy, which I think he is. Never mind. Contract void. I want to enter the transfer portal. And according to, according to Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, the agreement Damon Williams signed with Washington included a provision prohibiting him from entering the transfer portal. The school is now refusing to officially enter his name into the transfer portal database. So this is turned into a legal situation. Who's going to win, Damon Williams or Washington? Here's what I would say. Because anybody that's watched this show for any length of time knows you won't find very many more pro NIL guys than I am. I mean, since Carving It Up began in 2019, which was about a year and a half, late 2019, about a year and a half before the Supreme Court made name, image, and likeness the law in college sports, as they should have. I was for this from the jump. I'm like, okay, wait a second. You've got Duke superstar basketball players. Like you got Zion Williamson, for example, who's generating all the revenue and television ratings and putting butts in seats at Cameron Indoor. And he's the most entertaining college basketball player we've seen in 15 years, and he doesn't get a penny for it. Like that doesn't seem to square in a so-called capitalist society. That doesn't seem to work. And the Supreme Court essentially agreed with that. So I'm completely pro NIL. And I'm pro transfer portal. If you want to get an opportunity to work elsewhere, the Heisman Trophy winner, Fernando Mendoza, transfer. Diego Pavia, transfer. Like we see this all the time in college sports. Like Julian Sayin, transfer. So I think this idea that, this is taking the purity out of college football, to me, it's kind of putting pressure on these coaches and administrators to say, hey, there's no excuse. Look at what Kirk Cignetti's done at Indiana. You can turn a program around much quicker than you used to. Like it allows these programs to retool quicker than they ever have in the history of the game, which I think is great for the sport. So that part's good. But as is the case with virtually every industry, and I talked about this a couple of months ago with the story we've probably all forgot about by now, the NBA gambling scandal with Terry Rozier and Chauncey Billups and Damon Jones and others, is in any industry, alcohol, drugs, sports gambling, college sports, NIL, any form of overregulation is bad for the sport, or bad for the sport is bad for that particular business. Non-regulation is equally bad. It's just the Wild West, and there's the powers that be, so to speak, do not have an ear to the situation, don't have eyeballs to the situation. Like Adam Silver and the NBA being involved with these gambling companies is a good thing. Does allow them to be able to detect a Terry Rozier placing, like who's placing prop bets on Terry Rozier over under points. Like no one's doing that except for probably Terry Rozier. Whereas if he's doing it through underground bookies, so to speak, they can't find that. The same applies to college sports. Overregulation is bad. Like college sports is kind of overcorrected. For years, couldn't make a penny. If you sold a jersey with your last name and number on it, man, it was like the death penalty in college sports. You get suspended. I remember Chase Young, when he was at Ohio State, there was a situation where I think he bought his family tickets to the Rose Bowl. It was his girlfriend, his family, I forget which. And they suspended him. Like, he got a suspension for that the following season. It's like, wait a second. The man can't let his family come watch him play. He can't pay money out of his own pocket. That seems wrong. That's overregulation. That's overcorrection. That's overprotective parent. But then there's, on the other side, is the parents like, the kids can do whatever, grow up however you're going to grow up. That's what it is now. Where it's at, you just kind of do you. To the point where you have a situation like this, where a kid, really talented kid, Damon Williams, says, hey, I want to extend with Washington. Okay. Well, then you got to complete the deal. And then after the season's over, going to 2027, depending on your NFL future or potential, or whatever the case may be, stay with Washington, go to the draft, extend, do whatever you want to do. In this period of time, it's up to the athlete to negotiate with the program they're with, or to say, I want to pursue another opportunity elsewhere. To which I say, no problem with that whatsoever for the athlete. But once you agree to the contract, like that's kind of how business works. Like I get companies can break ties. I understand that, but there also is an element of at what point is there going to be a governing body of trusted individuals? And I know college football has been great with that over the years, the NCAA in particular, to set guardrails. There's a reason. I mean, Rick Pitino said it best. If the head coach at St. Mary's, or St. John's rather, he says when the Lane Kiffin situation happened, he's like, "This is nothing. It's a calendar issue. Like college basketball coaches aren't leaving their programs right before March Madness, to where because the schedule is what it is with early, signing day and the transfer portal being smack dab in the middle of the playoff, in between the quarterfinal and the semifinal." Lane Kiffin's kind of put in a little bit of a conundrum. Now Lane Kiffin is potentially poaching his coaches from Ole Miss right as Ole Miss is about to play a playoff game tomorrow. So it applies to coaches. It applies to players. A situation like what's going on in Washington with Damon Williams should not even be a thing. If the kid wants to transfer, cool. He wants to extend at Washington, cool. But you can't sign a deal with the Huskies, then see that the market has adjusted because the Texas Tech quarterback is staying there on about a $5 million deal and say, actually, no, let's reverse that. Like, sorry, that's how business works. Fair or unfair, that's how it works. So if I had to guess, Washington probably wins this. Although, how's that going to help them going into the football season 2026? Probably not very much. But the Lane Kiffin thing should not be a thing. Lane Kiffin should get to decide if he's going to Ole Miss or if he's going to LSU or stay at Ole Miss, because signing day, transfer portal happens after the playoff. That's like if free agency in the NFL, NBA, Major League Baseball happened, in the case of the NFL, let that be like if free agency was in 2 weeks. Like, wait a second, those guys still playing. Like, they can't just leave their teams. The season's not over yet. So the lack of authority, the lack of administration, after too much authority and too much administration prior to the NIL transfer portal era, it's been too much of an overcorrection for the sport, and it's hurting it. And that's why you see situations like this. So it's really unfortunate. It really, really is. James Dillon, and is James Dillon Dean, I believe is the username. Damon Williams with a contract for next year enters the portal. Is this insane or what? Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's, again, Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports reported the agreement Damon Williams signed with Washington included a provision prohibiting him from entering the transfer portal, and the school's now refusing to officially enter his name into the transfer portal database. It's a mess. It really, really is. And again, the Lane Kiffin situation, this should not be a thing in college sports. Again, those are a little bit different scenarios. The players should get paid. The players should have the ability to transfer at season's end if they so choose. But once you sign the dotted line, like, you're there. Like that, you made the decision. No one made you sign that contract. Like, you did that. After the season, if you want to leave, cool. Knock yourself out. It's a broken system, and the NCAA is not exactly known for being organized. No one's ever accused them of that, but when college football is the dominant, non-professional sport that we have in America, let's get your ducks in a row. Like, this has become a professional business more so than it ever has been. We're 5 years now. We're coming up on 5 years since NIL became legalized, as it should have been objectively. But we got to have more regulation for this. So that's where I'm at. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, though, a quick take I had on Kevin Stefanski with the John Harbaugh news and how it relates to some of the playoff games this week. And also, a quick edition of Bryson's Best 10, my top 10 teams going into wildcard weekend. And, of course, one of my favorite segments that I do at this time every year. All 14 playoff teams, what is the biggest reason, the biggest weakness, biggest reason they will not win the Super Bowl? All of that is coming up next on Carving Up Live, so do not go anywhere. We'll be right back in just 1 minute. Welcome back to Carving Up Live. Thanks to everybody for stopping by on a Wednesday. We are gearing up. We're going to have 5 straight days of playoff football. 2 playoff. We got I think it's the Fiesta Bowl tomorrow between Miami and Ole Miss. You got the Peach Bowl on Friday between Oregon and Indiana. You got 2 playoff games Saturday, 3 playoff games on Sunday, and 1 playoff game on Monday. I mean, like, does it get better than this? 5 consecutive days of win or go home football. I will take it gladly, to say the very least. Let's talk quickly, though, about Kevin Stefanski, because, again, I discussed this on Monday's show. The full clip is on YouTube now on the Carving Up YouTube channel. Feel free to check it out after the show's over. We don't want you leaving just yet. With the John Harbaugh news being official, because initially it looks like, okay, they didn't fire him Monday, so they call it Black Monday. Pete Carroll got fired. Jonathan Gannon got fired. Raheem Morris actually got fired on Sunday, and Kevin Stefanski got fired Monday. That's usually when, if you haven't fired your coach during the season and you're going to, you do it the day after the Week 18 games. In the case of the Ravens, they waited another day to do it. Now that this is official, now that the Ravens is without question the best job in the market, you can say the Giants because of the potential of a Jackson Dart, and you've got young players like Abdul Carter, Malik Neighbors, and Cam Scadaboo. You can say the Raiders because he had the first overall pick, because Tom Brady's in the front office. Neither of those are sure things. Like, if you want a coach to be able to come in and build a culture, set the foundation, build it from nothing, that is a thing for a coach to think about. But for the Baltimore Ravens, this team was the 1 seed like 2 years ago, and coming into this season, they were the favorites to win the Super Bowl. And they've got a 2-time league MVP at quarterback who's still one of the 5 best at his position. Like, it's just like, it's very, very similar to when the Packers job opening was there in 2019, or going into 2019, when, wait a second, I can take a head coaching job to where I inherit prime Aaron Rodgers. Sign me up. And that's what Matt LaFleur did. And Matt LaFleur, Packers fans feel that he's underachieved a little bit, but the 3 Aaron Rodgers, he was actually there for 4 years there, and 2 of those years he won league MVP. I say all that to say this, that Kevin Stefanski, certainly his options initially was like, okay, is it going to be Atlanta? Is it going to be Vegas, the Giants? Now he's got to be reassessing. Holy crap, Baltimore's open. Wait a second, I know this division. I know the AFC North. Like, this is right in my backyard. Coached this division for 6 seasons now. So this wouldn't be that big of an adjustment. Wouldn't be that long of a move. Here's what I would say to a guy like Kevin Stefanski. Heck, here's what I would say to John Harbaugh, who are now the 2 most attractive candidates on the market. Wait until the playoffs. Wait until Wild Card Weekend is over. In particular, wait after the game on Sunday at 1 o'clock Eastern and Monday night at 8:15 Eastern. Wait for the Bills game. Wait for the Steelers game. Because if Buffalo goes into a playoffs in which they've got the number 1 pass defense in football, in which Josh Allen, down season from last year, but he's still Josh Allen. You've got one of, if not the best running back in football, one of the top 5 offensive lines. No Mahomes, no Lamar, no Joe Burrow, and you go out in round 1. Like that, you just went backwards after going to the AFC Championship game and coming that close a year ago. And there's already been some rumblings that the Bills move on from McDermott. They want to get more of an offense-minded coach to pair with Josh Allen. Feels like a good job for Kevin Stefanski. Harbaugh's not an offensive or defensive coach. He's actually a special teams guy, but he's assembled some good staffs in his time in Baltimore. You think he wouldn't like to go from Lamar Jackson to Josh Allen? That's pretty good. Not too much of a downgrade. It might actually be an upgrade at that position. And then Pittsburgh. Now, I'll be honest. As a Steelers fan, I wouldn't be crazy going from Mike Tomlin to John Harbaugh because to me, they're kind of one and the same. Good culture guys. Harbaugh's better at putting staffs together than Tomlin. Tomlin has been more consistent than Harbaugh. It just feels like you're on the same kind of track where you need a little bit of an identity change as an organization. Kind of like the Chicago Bears had by hiring Ben Johnson. But if you are Kevin Stefanski in particular, you look at Pittsburgh. You say, if you look at the three, Baltimore, Buffalo, Pittsburgh. Baltimore and Buffalo have two of the 5 best quarterbacks in the sport. Pittsburgh does not. Boy, you got job security in Pittsburgh. I mean, the Browns fired this man after winning 2 Coach of the Years. The Cleveland Browns said, yeah, we can do better. Shows a pretty bad lack of self-awareness, doesn't it? The Steelers almost go too far in the other direction. Like, it takes... They've had 3 head coaches since 1969. They've had 3 head coaches since Nixon became president. A lot of job security in Pittsburgh. Again, he's familiar with the AFC North. So if you're Kevin Stefanski, and to a degree if you're John Harbaugh, wait until the first round of the playoffs are over. But because if Buffalo wins and Pittsburgh wins, okay, then those jobs probably aren't coming open. Buffalo almost certainly isn't. Pittsburgh probably the same. Although again, and I think it was Rappaport. I think it was Tom Pelissero said, yeah, people close to Tomlin, sources close to Tomlin say he still could walk away from the Steelers. Those reports have been circulating for the last month or so. Even Big Ben alluded to it on his podcast. So it's food for thought. Now, if you're somebody like a Joe Brady, Brian Flores, Raheem Moore, like if you're one of these guys that, I saw Jason Garrett interview with the Titans yesterday. Like, you kind of got to take whatever the best job in the market is. Whereas these upper tier candidates, like a Stefanski, like a Harbaugh, potentially Tomlin, could have their pick of where they want to go. By the way, don't rule out 2 individuals as well. Mike McCarthy and Brian Dable. I could see their name coming into the mark as well. Remember, McCarthy took a year off between Green Bay and Dallas. Did win 12 games, 3 straight years for what it's worth. And then Dable. I think Dable's a much better OC than he is a head coach. The Giants all the time were kind of unorganized, a lot of penalties. I didn't think he fostered the greatest relationship, with his quarterbacks. The fact that Daniel Jones did have success elsewhere, which was kind of Dable's claim to fame. Hey, he made Daniel Jones work. Well, Daniel Jones looked okay in Indianapolis before the injury. So I would hire Dable in a second to be my OC, probably not as my head coach. But those are 2 names to consider. All right. Quickly, before we get into playoff strengths and weaknesses, I did want to go ahead and put up 2 graphics. The first is Bryson's best 10. This is our final Bryson's best 10 NFL teams. Next week, we'll have Bryson's best 8 NFL teams. And then the weeks leading up to the conference championships and the Super Bowl, we're going to have the top 10 players left. So the 4 teams left and the 2 teams left will rank the top 10 players. But here's my top 10 teams in the league. Not a lot of change. There's no change from the 1 through 4 spots. Seattle stays at 1. Again, they got the 1 seed. The defense is unbelievable, and the running game has improved as of late. Patriots are 14-3. They look fantastic. Drake May has a legit argument to be MVP. Jacksonville, to me, is the team that not enough people are talking about. I am, and again, maybe it's just because they are the Jacksonville Jaguars, then they're not. Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Baltimore, Dallas, Green Bay, like one of these apex, iconic NFL franchises. They've got the best quarterback in football post-Thanksgiving. They've got a legit candidate for Coach of the Year in Liam Cohen. They run the football effectively. They got an excellent offensive line. They've got good receivers and the best run defense in the NFL. Like, that feels like a championship contender. Rams are at 4. They stay at 4 again, just by virtue of this offense being so darn dangerous. Again, you'll hear my weakness about the Rams, which I do have some reservations about, but I keep them at 4. The offensive personnel is too good. Chicago moves up a spot to 5. Again, from 5 to 10, it is pretty darn razor thin. These, to me, the top 4 to me are the clear 4 best teams in the NFL. The 4 teams I think are most likely to win the Super Bowl. 5 to 10, any of those teams could. I have my reservations in certain ways. With Chicago, you'll hear that later. Again, I'm more saving my negative stuff for the playoff weaknesses. Denver moves up a spot. I have my concerns about them. Philly moves up a spot, even despite the loss of Washington, the defending champions. You have to give them respect to a certain degree. Buffalo Bills move up 2 spots. They have one of the most experienced quarterbacks in the playoffs outside of Stafford and Rodgers in Josh Allen. Houston moves up a spot. Niners fall 5 spots. Again, the injuries are just killing San Francisco's case. The second graphic I want to show is my final MVP ladder ballot. So this is, if I had an MVP vote, it would look as follows. Stafford would be my MVP, and I talked about that on Monday. If you want to hear my case, feel free to check out the video on the YouTube channel now on Carving It Up. Drake May would be the 2. It's a razor-thin race. As I've said, I have no problem. Either of these 2 guys, one of them are going to win MVP. Anyone who acts like it's May by a mile, Stafford by a mile are lying to themselves. It's razor-thin. There's a legit argument you can make for both. I'd have Christian McCaffrey at 3. I think the fact that he was the constant for the San Francisco offense, despite all the injuries on that side of the football, and the fact that this was a guy who, it was the all-purpose leader in yards, actually second all-purpose leader in yards, I think behind Bijan Robinson. He was sensational, catch the ball in the backfield, run the football. If you stop Christian McCaffrey, the offense basically dies, as we saw last week against Seattle, but Christian McCaffrey was sensational. Listen, Myles Garrett broke the sack record. I don't want to know what you mean. He broke the sack record doing so with less opportunities, less pass attempts defended than anybody in the history of the NFL who's had 21 or more sacks. So Garrett is in the 4 spot, and Trevor Lawrence is in the 5 spot. Again, can we show Trevor's numbers, since before we get into the negative about Jacksonville, some of the other teams, Trevor in the last 6 games, or this is 5 games, I should say 6, first in touchdowns. First, it really is technically last in interceptions. Second in yards per game, second in rating, first in QBR, second in team points per game, and first in record. They're 6-0. So Trevor would be on my MVP ballot. He would get that 5 spot. Okay. So this is a segment we do every year, the Wednesday or whatever the midweek show is before the postseason begins. I look at each of the 14 playoff teams. I say, okay, what is the biggest reason this team will not win the Super Bowl? And usually I go about 10 for 14. I think one year, a couple of years ago, I think I went 11 for 14. Like looking back, or I guess technically 11 for 13 because somebody does end up winning the Super Bowl. But you look at the playoffs when they're over and you say, okay, yeah, that's what got them beat. Oh, they couldn't stop the run. They turned the ball over too much. Oh, they were inexperienced. This quarterback isn't good in the big spots. We have questions about this coach. Whatever that may be, we'll go over each of the 14 playoff teams. We're going to start in the AFC. So there's the AFC playoff teams. Pretty straightforward. Broncos, Patriots, Jaguars, Steelers as the division champions. 3 wildcard teams are the Texans, Bills, and Chargers. We will start from 17 and go up to 1. The Los Angeles Chargers' biggest weakness is the O-line is a mess, just like Justin in January. So we know about the offensive line. We know the fact that they've lost 2 tackles in the case of Rashawn Slater and in Joe Alt. We know that's been an issue for them. But to me, something that has not gotten nearly enough attention this week. We talk about the pressure on Josh Allen to win a playoff game this week in Jacksonville with no Mahomes, Lamar, or Joe Burrow in the playoff picture. I would argue there's not as much because Herbert isn't as good as Allen. I think Justin Herbert has the second most amount of pressure of any quarterback in Wild Card Weekend. This is a guy who is 0-2 in the playoffs. This is a guy who has a passer rating of 60 in the playoffs, who has double the interceptions as he does touchdowns in his 2 playoff games. In one, he was the quarterback of a team that blew a 27-0 lead to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And last year, as a favorite, went to Houston and threw more picks in that game than he had all regular season. That's a concern. If they go to Foxborough and the defense, which we know the defense is good with the Chargers, Jesse Minter is an excellent defensive coordinator. If Herbert struggles, it's kind of on par for the course. Wasn't good in the second half against Jacksonville. Was horrible last year from start to finish against Houston. If he's bad in New England, it's kind of who he is. We're 6 years into his career. We got to see more from Herbert in the playoffs. I have my doubts. That is the biggest weakness for the LA Chargers. For the Buffalo Bills, I kind of mentioned Josh Allen briefly. The Buffalo Bills, they can't close big playoff games, and I'll explain exactly why. So I think the roster at this point has almost gotten a little bit underrated in the case of Buffalo. Yes, the receiving core isn't amazing, but no roster in the NFL is perfect. They've got the number 1 pass defense in the NFL. They've got the best quarterback in the playoffs in the case of Josh Allen. They've got one of the best offensive lines led by Deion Dawkins, one of the top tackles. You've got James Cook, league leader in rushing. It got two good tight ends. This is not a bad roster by any stretch of the imagination. Smart OC. Here's the thing with Buffalo. What happened 2 years ago? They had the home playoff game against the Kansas City Chiefs. They were a favorite. Casey was coming in. Remember that was the team that Casey couldn't catch a cold. Tony and Valdez-Scantling. Josh Allen gets the ball in his hands, down 3 in the fourth quarter, chance to go tie or take the lead. And on the third down that preceded the Tyler Bass missed kick that would have tied the game, He has Stephon Diggs wide open coming across the screen for what would have been a first down to keep the drive going. Maybe Buffalo scores and wins the game right there. Or at least worst case, to make the field goal easier. Last year, to me, it was even worse. At Kansas City, people were like, oh, the calls were going against Buffalo. The refs were had it in the bag for the Chiefs. Absurd claim, but let's say that's true. Josh Allen had the ball in his hands, 3.5 minutes to go, with a chance to tie or take the lead, down 3. The Bills offense got 1 first down. Kansas City got more yards on their drive to eat the clock than Buffalo did on their drive to try and go tie or win the game. Josh Allen in the postseason has been sensational. But if you're going to be the guy that it feels like the majority of the NFL media and fans like, oh yeah, that's the best quarterback, we kind of need a playoff moment that comes in a win. The greatest playoff moment of Josh's career, he was awesome in that game back in 2021, but they lost. By no fault of his own, but they lost. I want to see a Josh Allen moment in a winning scenario, going to Jacksonville or going to Denver. If they beat Jacksonville, they're almost certainly going to the Mile High and taking on the Broncos. Like, we're kind of waiting for that Josh Allen moment, and we haven't seen it since that game that they lost to Kansas City 4 years ago. That's the biggest weakness for the Buffalo Bills. Rounding out the AFC wildcard teams, we're going to talk about the Houston Texans. What is their biggest weakness? Kind of similar. It starts with their quarterback. Stroud stinks against good teams, and it's pretty straightforward. CJ Stroud against playoff teams this season has 6 touchdowns, 7 picks, 6-7, with a 78.6 passer rating. So, like, this is a Houston Texans offense. We know it's inconsistent. We know that the passing game is kind of hit or miss with Nico Collins, Xavier Hutchinson, Dalton Schultz. It's a good group of pass catchers. There's no question about it. The defense in Houston, we know who they are and what they represent. We know that they've got 2 guys in the top 10 in sacks in the case of Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson. We know about Derek Stingley Jr., who, as far as I'm concerned, is the best corner in football. We know about these guys. Aziz Al-Shir, D'Amico Ryan's the defensive guy. So we look at Houston as the legit Super Bowl contender. Hey, they're 12-5. They're the scariest wildcard team we've seen. And then our head kind of turns to the offense. What y'all going to do? You're going to hold up your end of the bargain? You're going to Pittsburgh. I'll get to the Steelers in just a moment. The defense leaves some things to be desired in Pittsburgh. What you going to do, CJ Stroud, who's been good in the postseason, the first round? This year against good teams, a 78 passer rating, more picks than touchdowns. That could sink Houston. I think it will, in the long run, sink the Houston Texans. That is their biggest weakness. To my Steelers, it's actually twofold. Go and put up Pittsburgh's biggest weakness. They can't get stops in the biggest moments and slow starts in playoff games. It's pretty straightforward. We'll start with the second one and go to the first one. The slow starts in playoff games is pretty darn straightforward. We've had this graphic for a year on the show. Go and put it up. They start playoff games really poorly. Down 21-0 to the Jags in 2017, 28-0 to the Browns in 2020, 35-7 to the Chiefs in 2021, 21-0 to the Bills in 2023, and last year against the Ravens, the team you're supposed to be so familiar with. Ravens and Steelers always play close games, not in the playoffs. 21-0 in Baltimore last season. Mike Tomlin, I think that in the first quarter of the last 5 or 6 playoff games, Mike Tomlin teams get outscored 73-0. That's coaching. So Tomlin is not off the hook on that. He's also not off the hook because he's a defensive coach. The Steelers defense, which is the highest paid defense in the NFL, not only do they rank 26th in total defense, I saw this stat because watching the game the other night and watching other Steelers games like against Detroit recently and against Baltimore, the first matchup, I'm like, man, it feels like offenses kind of get going against us in the fourth quarter. The numbers back it up. Did you know the Pittsburgh Steelers are dead last in the NFL in fourth quarter points per game allowed? The Steelers are dead last. They allow 10 points per fourth quarter. In playoff games that are decided by that much, razor thin, Steelers are the worst. Every defense in the NFL better than Pittsburgh in that particular spot. So Pittsburgh plays Houston on Monday night, and they go in with a 16-13 lead. I'm nervous. I feel pretty confident the game's going to be close, but I'm nervous. As great as TJ Watt is, despite the injuries, and Cam Hayward's been a man amongst boys over the last month, they, for whatever reason, they can't get a big takeaway in a big spot. They can't bring the quarterback down in a big spot. And some of that falls on Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin that I have concerns about, and the fact that the Steelers always get started slow in playoff games. That is the biggest weakness for my Pittsburgh Steelers. To the Jacksonville Jaguars, what's their biggest weakness? Well, they have an average pass defense if they can't force turnovers. It's pretty straightforward. With Jacksonville, they're second in the NFL in forced turnovers to the Chicago Bears, but they have the 19th ranked pass defense in the National Football League. Like that's going to be a concern. I know folks are talking about the AFC not having the names we're all familiar with. Doesn't have Mahomes, doesn't have Lamar Jackson, doesn't have Joe Burrow. but it does have Josh Allen, it does have Drake May. Aaron Rodgers is at least experienced in the postseason, and Justin Herbert, we'll see. Like the quarterback play isn't exactly shabby on the AFC side of the bracket. So if you're not able to take the football away, that's going to be a little bit of a concern. Listen, y'all know what I think about Trevor Lawrence and that Jags offense. I think they are on an absolute heater right now. Trevor's been the best quarterback in the league since Thanksgiving. But if the defense does not take the ball away, and I think their defense is great. They're number one in the NFL stopping the run. So, like, if they're able to get in third down long situations, that could help them. But if other teams are able to establish a run early, if Buffalo with James Cook and Josh Allen establish a run early and they don't take the ball away from Josh Allen, that could be a concern for them on Sunday afternoon and beyond in the playoffs should they advance. That is the Jacksonville Jaguars' biggest weakness. To the 14-win New England Patriots, their biggest weakness is they struggle against their equals in weight class. And again, Patriots fans are going to say that this isn't fair. It's kind of a then you have to show me type of situation. Listen, not only the New England Patriots, and I think we have the graphic from Monday's show, not only did the Patriots play the weakest strength of schedule in the NFL this season, put up the graphic. Since the merger, they played the 8th easiest schedule in NFL history since the merger. I mean, the only teams ahead of them pre-21st century. I mean, you got some Vikings teams, some Dolphins teams. But by the way, some of those teams, 72 Dolphins, 99 Rams, they won the Super Bowl. Teams like the 79 Rams, I believe the Vikings in 75, if I remember correctly, went to the Super Bowl. So this isn't a death sentence for New England, but it does come down to the fact that they're 1-2 against playoff teams. They lost to Pittsburgh, committing 5 turnovers. They lost, they beat Buffalo at Buffalo, and then they blew a 21-0 lead at home in Gillette with a chance to wrap up the division in Buffalo or against Buffalo. Had they won that game, the Patriots would be the 1 seed today. It's like that's something that could come back to bite them in the future potentially. I'm not a huge buyer in Denver. I'll get to them in just a moment. But let's see what they do against the true legit playoff teams. If they do get pushed around to a certain degree, it's like, okay, they weren't really tested in the regular season, and we'll see how they regroup in 2026. That is the New England Patriots' biggest weakness. And finally, for the Denver Broncos, the number 1 seed in the conference, that late game pixie dust will run out. There is a stat, and I looked into this, that is truly shocking. Listen, we know NFL games are decided in the margins. We understand that a field goal here, a holding call to kill a drive there can be the difference between winning and losing. The margins are that thin in the National Football League. The old saying is you lose more games than you win in the NFL because sometimes teams kick themselves and you take advantage of that. Even with that being said, for a number 1 seed, for a 14-3 football team that lost 1 game after week 3 the entire rest of the season, if you look at the number of games that each of the AFC playoff teams won by a score, the percentage of their wins that came by 1 score, here's what you'll find. Denver's in a class of their own. So we'll go Chargers on up. So 1 score wins this season of their wins. 54% of the Chargers wins were 1 score. 50% of the Bills, 58 with the Texans, 70 for the Steelers. That's pretty high. 46 with the Jaguars, 50 with the Patriots, 85% with the Denver Broncos. 85%. 12 of their 14 wins this season came by 1 score. Some of those came against the awful Jets, against the 3rd-string Kansas City Chiefs quarterback on Christmas when you're a 2-touchdown favorite. I mean, you struggle at times to put away Trey Lance on Sunday. Don't get me wrong. I love the defensive line. Sean Payton's a Super Bowl winning head coach. I have my concerns about Bo Nix. The roster's good. The roster looks like a number 1 seed, but in executing some of these games late, they've been great. But before that, against lesser competition, that could be something that bites Denver in the behind when it's all said and done. That is the biggest weakness I have for the Denver Broncos. And so let me get a drink of water real quick. So let's look back over the biggest weaknesses from 7-1, and then we'll go to the NFC. So for the Chargers, O-line is a mess, just like Justin in January. Herbert struggles in the postseason, and we know about the injuries in their O-line. The Buffalo Bills can't close big playoff games. Down 3 the last 2 years in the 4th quarter. Chance to take the lead against the Chiefs. Lost twice. Came up empty twice. Houston Texans, Stroud stinks against good teams. CJ Stroud, obviously, more touchdowns than picks against playoff teams this year. For my Steelers, can't get stops in the biggest moments. Worst 4th quarter defense of football, 4th quarter scoring defense in the NFL, and slow starts in playoff games. 73-0 1st quarter starts in the last 5 playoff games for Pittsburgh. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, average pass defense if they can't force turnovers. 2nd turnovers, 19th against the pass. For the Patriots, they struggle against their equals in weight class. They are 1-2 against playoff teams this year. And the Denver Broncos, late game pixie dust will run out. 85%, far more Not even close. Far more than any other team in the AFC in terms of the number of their wins, percentage of their wins that came by one score. 85% for the Broncos. I think that will get them beat in the postseason. So now let's shift to the NFC. So let's do the NFC strengths and weaknesses, playoff strengths and weaknesses. So let's go and show the playoff bracket. So here you go, from 1 to 7. Division winners, Seahawks, Bears, Eagles, and Panthers. Wildcard teams are Rams, 49ers, and Packers. We'll start, just like in the AFC, from 7 and go up from there. For the Green Bay Packers, their biggest weakness is late game execution leaves things to be desired. Listen, my sister's a Packers fan, as some of you out there know. One of my favorite college professors is a huge Packers fan. Both have kind of in spots complained about Matt LaFleur's game management. Some confusing games they've lost. Wait, you blew a double-digit lead to the Browns with Joe Flacco? How does that happen in the last 5 minutes of a game? How does it happen where you lose at home to Carolina? I know the Panthers are a playoff team, but still, you can't lose at Lambeau Field to Carolina Panthers. You can't lose when you only give up 16 points in that game. The loss to Philadelphia, they scored a touchdown at home. Like, I know Philly's got a great defense, but come on. They've lost to Chicago, up double digits in the fourth. Like, the Packers have had a lot of, how did they lose the tie against Dallas? How do you tie the Cowboys and Dallas doesn't have CeeDee Lamb? How does that happen? And so, like, that's something you look at. I think this Bears-Packers game coming up this weekend is going to be, I feel like it's kind of a coin flip game. And the line kind of reflects that. It keeps fluctuating between Chicago or Green Bay favored by a point. I think it's going to look very, very similar in terms of margin of victory potentially, as we saw in that game a few weeks back. It's those little things where other coaches, to me, have an advantage over Green Bay. That, to me, is their biggest weakness. For the San Francisco 49ers, this is an easy one. Next man up, they're out of men. And in addition, kind of like with the Steelers earlier, and Purdy is a bad trailing quarterback. Let's start with the obvious. Next man up, they're out of men. Again, we hear the phrase, next man up, they eventually run out of guys. The San Francisco 49ers this season, it is remarkable. These are some of the guys, and not all these guys are out right now, but they have lost to injury. Brock Purdy, Trent Williams, Juwan Jennings, George Kittle, Ricky Pearsall, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa. Brandon Ayuk has been out with an injury, but also he's going to be away from the team after the season. Tatum Bethune, D. Winters, Michael Williams. I even saw a report today. It's Wednesday at the time of this recording, but from Adam Schefter, Trent Williams, Ricky Pearsall aren't practicing. Like, that's obviously neither of them played against the Seattle Seahawks in the game that decided the 1 seed on Saturday night. So, like, this is eventually just run out of bodies. Shanahan's done an amazing job with this team. McCaffrey will be my number 3 spot for MVP this year. Eventually run out of bodies. As for Purdy, who's a good quarterback, he is not a special quarterback. Brock Purdy trailing in the second half of the regular season. Here are his numbers. 65% completion, not bad. 9 touchdowns, 17 picks. That's Brock Purdy trailing in the second half in the regular season. 9 touchdowns, 17 interceptions, a passer rating of 74. So if you get down at all against the Philadelphia Eagles in the second half on the road against that defense, Purdy has kind of a tendency, we're just being fair here, to kind of wilt under that kind of pressure. That, and if the fact the Niners just run out of bodies, feels like we'll knock the 49ers out of the postseason pretty early this year. The division rival, the Los Angeles Rams are up next. What's their biggest weakness? The defense has been terrible for a month. I mean, like, I know this is kind of going under the radar because you look at their personnel, you're like, gosh, they've got 2 really good pass rushers. They've got, Byron Young, and they've got, what's my man's name? Oh my God. Jared Verse, the other pass rusher for the Rams. It's like, how is this defense bad? Well, last month of the season, from the Panthers game, who they're obviously playing this weekend, from the Panthers game on November 30th on to the rest of the regular season, the Los Angeles Rams are 23rd in yards allowed, 26th in points allowed. So, like, that to me kind of bolsters Stafford's MVP case even more. Like, Stafford and Puka Nacua have had to carry this offense. We know about Kyron Williams, Puka Nacua, Devontae Adams looks like he's going to be back from injury, and Stafford is a legit MVP candidate. I think he should win it. Feels like they're going to have to kind of overcome a defense that has fallen apart in recent weeks, in the last month or so. So if the Los Angeles Rams lose a game 30-27, it's like that kind of feels about right. Stafford balls out, throws for 350 yards. Puka has a couple of wow plays. They run the football, and they cannot stop a nosebleed. That feels like that's the way the Rams season could end. If it does, short of winning the Lombardi Trophy, that is the Los Angeles Rams' biggest weakness. I'm going to be honest. This next one's going to sound a little mean, but it's we have eyeballs. We got to be honest in the show. The Carolina Panthers' biggest weakness is they're easily the worst team in the playoffs. Like, I mean, this one's pretty simple. So there's the fact that they are 8-9. They've lost more games they've won. That's number 1. Number 2, I saw this. In the worst division in football, the NFC South, they have the third worst point differential. Tampa had a better point differential. Atlanta had a better point differential this season than the Carolina Panthers. All 8 of their wins this year, according to my research, came as underdogs. Now, that's a credit to them. There's a big credit to Dave Canales. Bryce Young has been clutch in the fourth quarter this year. Kudos where it's due. I like Rico Dowdle a lot. They've got some solid receivers, Tetman Millen. But stacked up against the big dogs in the NFC, even beat up teams like the Niners and teams that are struggling defensively like the Rams, who they're playing this weekend. It's like they just don't have the players. Again, I like Canales a lot, and Bryce has been clutch this year, but can you get in a situation where he has the opportunity to be clutch? You have this division on the line, in your own control, in your own destiny at Tampa. I guess some officiating calls went your way. That was pretty brutal. That is the biggest weakness of the Panthers. They're just not as good as the other teams. Easily the worst team in the postseason bracket this year. For the defending Super Bowl champion Philadelphia Eagles, what is the biggest reason they will not go back-to-back? Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, Eagle is a bird. The offense flies away in the second half. It flies away. So, listen, the personnel is what it is. Y'all know I believe in Jalen Hurts after what he did in the Super Bowl last year and what he did in the Super Bowl 2 years prior to that. A.J. Brown, for as much of a headache as he can be, incredibly gifted receiver. Saquon Barkley, down year, but I think he's still top 10 in rushing. Saquon still had a solid year despite bad offensive line play. Devontae Smith, Goddard, they've got the guys on that side of the football. Kevin Patullo, The Philadelphia Eagles this season, 26th in points per second half, 29th in the NFL in fourth quarter scoring. They will have halves. They had one recently against the Buffalo Bills a couple of Sundays ago in Buffalo. Jalen Hurts doesn't complete a pass in the second half. Now, most of that, people are kind of bashing Jalen for it when you watch the tape. Guys weren't open. Now, I blame some of that on Kevin Patullo, or a lot of it on Patullo. You got to scheme these guys open. You got to give Jalen Hurts an opportunity to keep the chains rolling, keep the chains moving, and get this Philadelphia Eagles offense rolling. Listen, I still think this team's a scary threat in the playoffs. I really do. You give the threat of a defending champion, that benefit of the doubt, but you also look at, dang, man, they're winning games when they're scoring 13 points, 10 points, 16 points. Eventually that feels like it could come back and bite them. Listen, their pass rush since they added Jalen Phillips has been phenomenal. Jalen Carter, we know who he is. The secondary does have some concerns, but that offense, it has been, people say hit or miss. It's mostly been miss in the second half and in the fourth quarters of these games. If Philly just kind of dies on that side of the ball in a playoff game, feels like that could be their undoing. For the 2 seed Chicago Bears, we kind of played off one of their nicknames for their biggest weakness. The monsters of the midway defense. See what we did there? Midway. We're trying. We no pun intended, or a lot of pun intended. For Chicago, it's pretty straightforward. They've been called the monsters of the midway, the Monsters. They've got Mike Singletary and all these great defensive players. This year, 23rd in points, 29th in yards. There's a reason this Chicago Bears offense, I think this year, offensively, they're 7th in total offense. Caleb Williams is an excellent year. We know about the wide receivers, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Luther Burden, even Janae Walker, who came up big in the Packer game, the tight ends. They're stacked on that side of the ball. Great O-line, Ben Johnson. It feels like they could lose a game like what they lost to San Francisco a couple weeks back, where it's 42-38. Caleb is throwing darts. Caleb is making plays out to the pocket, avoiding sacks. Those of us like myself who are Caleb Williams fans are just like, oh my gosh, this guy's going to be a top 5 quarterback soon. And they just cannot get a stop. That feels like that's what's going to haunt them in the playoffs. It feels like they lose a high-scoring shootout game at some point, whether it's to Green Bay this weekend, whether it's the divisional round, or beyond that. That is the biggest weakness for the Chicago Bears. And finally, for the number 1 seed in the NFC, the Seattle Seahawks, their biggest weakness is Darnold has had the spooks for 2 months. Now, what does that mean? Because people remember back when Darnold was the Jets. Remember, he was playing the Patriots, Monday Night Football. He was seeing ghosts. Darnold was far from seeing ghosts. Darnold was clutching that fourth quarter against the Rams. But the last 2 months, he's had the spooks. Sam Darnold, last 2 months, 8 touchdowns, 8 picks. And as a matter of fact, I think if you add turnovers, it's 8 touchdowns, 10 turnovers with an 83 passer rating. But the Seahawks defense, second fewest points given up in the NFL in that span. That is why they've gone 7-1 in that stretch. The one game they lost was when Darnold threw 5 picks against the Rams, and they still could have won on a field goal at the end. The Seahawks team is well-rounded from top to bottom. Sam Darnold got one monkey off his back by winning a road game to get the 1 seed, which he wasn't able to do a year ago in Minnesota. That's off his back. You could say the defense carried him. Running game with Charbonnet and Kenneth Walker carried him. Bottom line, quarterback win. He gets the credit for that. Let's see what he does in the playoffs with home field advantage. Listen, there are going to be opportunities where the Seahawks defense, like they did against the Rams a couple weeks ago, kind of has a down day at the offense. Can you make the plays over the breadth of the game, in particular in the fourth quarter? We got to see if Sam Darnold can do that because he has struggled over the last 2 months. That is the biggest weakness for the Seattle Seahawks. So looking at the NFC, biggest weaknesses for each team. So from 7-1 for the Packers, late game execution leaves things to be desired. Multiple games this year against Dallas, Cleveland, Philadelphia, Chicago, in which they weren't able to make the big play when they needed to the most. For the 49ers, next men up, they're out of men. Well, that's pretty self-explanatory. Bosa gone, Warner gone, Kittle's been hurt, Trent Williams and Pearsall are not practicing. Purdy has been hurt this year. And speaking of Purdy, he's a bad trailing quarterback. He's a 74 passer rating with almost double the picks that he does touchdowns, trailing in the second half. For the Rams, the defense has been terrible for a month. Again, the Rams, 23rd in yards allowed, 26th in points allowed. For the Panthers, again, it sounds mean, but they're easily the worst team in the playoffs. Third worst point differential in their own division, minus 69. And by the way, also 2-5 against playoff teams. For the defending champion Eagles, they're an eagle. They're a bird. The offense flies away in the second half, 26th in second half points, 29th in fourth quarter points is where the Eagles offense ranks. For the Chicago Bears, the monsters of the midway defense. Obviously, the Chicago Bears, 23rd in points, 29th in yards. And for the Seattle Seahawks, Darnold has had the spooks. Not seeing ghosts, but he's had the spooks for 2 months. More turnovers than he has touchdowns with an 83 passer rating in the last 2 months, since week 11 to be precise, for the Seattle Seahawks. So, if you're a fan of any of these 14 teams, of which I am as a Steelers fan, that's going to be the reason your team does not win the Super Bowl. Now, one of these teams is. For one of these teams, we'll just throw it out the window. Maybe they overcome their biggest weakness. That's always satisfying to see. That always is a credit to the overall mental toughness of a football team. But for the other 13, you're going home for the reasons that I listed right there. Before we get out of here, we've got 2 college football playoff games coming up in the next 2 days. So let's, let's go and get the background music going on for that right now. Here we go. Okay, we will start with the Verbo Fiesta Bowl, which will be tomorrow night at 7:30 Eastern, 4:30 Pacific time in Arizona, featuring out of the ACC, the Miami Hurricanes. Out of the SEC, the Ole Miss Rebels. Miami is a 3.5-point favorite against Ole Miss in the spot. So, listen, both of these teams, I don't want to say people didn't think Ole Miss would be here, because the Lane Kiffin situation is really the big reason that folks didn't think Ole Miss would get here to this point by beating Georgia, and Tulane obviously before that. For Miami, there's folks who thought they didn't deserve to be in the playoff. I disagree with said people, and they validated that by going to Texas A&M and winning in College Station, by beating the defending national champion Ohio State Buckeyes, taking them to the cleaners at the line of scrimmage. And that, to me, is where this game is going to be decided. Whoever wins this game, it sounds cliche, it sounds straightforward, but it's true. Not just who decides the line of scrimmage, but who dictates the style which this game is going to be played. I feel like in a spot like this, semifinal game, the refs are going to kind of want to stay out of the way. They don't want to be the story of this game. The refs never do in big games like this. That's why college football, NFL, NBA, baseball, they appoint their best officials. They don't want officiating to be a story. This can be a situation where they kind of let them play. That is a gigantic advantage for the Miami Hurricanes. I understand Trinidad Chambliss, who was awesome against Georgia. His Georgia defense hasn't been quite the same that it has been in recent years, whereas Miami, that D-line, the best in the country without a question. Multiple NFL bodies on that side of the football. I think they have Trinidad Chambliss under pressure. I think they get a couple of takeaways. And I think the Miami Hurricanes, who people didn't think deserved to be in the playoff at all, they win their third straight playoff game, 23-17 over the Ole Miss Rebels, and Miami will advance to Miami to host the national championship game. That would be kind of not unprecedented, because I know USC has USC in the Rose Bowl. That's technically UCLA Stadium, but it would be in the modern college football era unprecedented for Miami to play at Hard Rock Stadium. That's where they play their home games. That's where the national championship is this year, and I think it's going to happen. As for, I can't wait for this game. As for the other college football playoff semifinal game, the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, featuring out of the Big Ten, the Oregon Ducks. Also out of the Big Ten, the Big Ten champions, the Indiana Hoosiers. Indiana is a 3.5-point favorite as the number 1 team in the country, number 1 seed in this tournament, against an Oregon team who they beat in Eugene earlier this season. That's the only game Oregon's lost all year. Let me tell you something, folks. Indiana, to me, has clearly shown me, and I think showed everybody, they're clearly the best team in the country. They don't make mistakes. They say penalty-free by and large. Mendoza's the best quarterback in college football and a deserving Heisman winner. Cignetti's the best coach in college football. They don't make mistakes. They don't beat themselves. So I'm battling with that. And then on the other side, it's, yeah, but 3 times this year. SEC Championship, first round, and then second round of the playoff. I've been beaten by the, it's hard to beat a team twice, bug. Alabama didn't beat Georgia twice. Oklahoma didn't beat Alabama twice. Georgia didn't beat Ole Miss twice. And maybe that's just an SEC thing. I don't know. And Kurt Cignetti kind of alluded to that. It's hard to beat a good team twice. With that being said, I do think this is a type of game. Styles make fights. These are the 2 best quarterbacks in college football. They could be the 1st and 2nd overall picks in the draft, depending on if Dante Moore wants to go to the Jets. If he doesn't, don't blame me, buddy. This is a place where all young quarterback dreams go to die. In a neutral site game in the South for 2 big teams going down south, so like there's not going to be, I would imagine, that big of a home field advantage one way or the other. It's obviously closer to Indiana, but still. I just trust Fernando Mendoza against a great Oregon defense who had all those takeaways last week against Texas Tech. It's one thing to do it against the Red Raiders offense, which not even close to as good as Indiana. It's another thing to do it against the Heisman Trophy winner. Give me in a close one the Indiana Hoosiers to win this game. I'm going to take Oregon to cover plus 3.5 because I do think their defensive line can give this Indiana offense some problems. I do think Indiana's up 8. I think Oregon gets a backdoor cover. Indiana's up 8. Oregon scores a touchdown. They go for 2 to try and tie the game, and they get stuffed. And the Indiana Hoosiers, ladies and gentlemen, who'd have seen this coming, will be headed to the national championship game. So I think we're going to get Indiana versus Miami. May the best team win. I think it'd be an absolutely fantastic national championship contest. And with that being said, that is all the time we have for today's episode of Carving Up Live. Thanks to everybody for stopping by. Be sure to catch the show on Friday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific time right here on YouTube, as well as on Facebook, Twitch, and X. We'll probably be on Instagram as well that night. Also, before we get out of here, feel free, we do this the last few shows, check out the new Carving It Up merch. Scan that QR code right there. We've got hoodies, t-shirts, we've got coffee mugs, we've got teddy bears if you want, we've got jogging shorts, we've got jogging pants, anything that you can possibly imagine. If you want to rep Carving It Up, you can purchase it on the website. You also look at some of the other merchandise from some of my incredible teammates, the Grid Network, Boston Sports Summit, All Even Podcast, Saturday Morning Tailgate, a show that I'm a part of. You name it, we've got it at the Grid Network. So check out Mike and Josh, by the way, who have launched their show recently, have done a great job. Check out Carving It Up merch, and feel free to check out other merch from the Grid Network. We would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Rep the brand, rep Carving It Up wherever you go. All right, we will see you guys on Friday for a playoff preview predicting all 6 playoff games. I cannot wait for it. Hope everybody has a great week. We'll see you then on Friday. Stay safe out there. God bless y'all. Peace out. Tomlin, I'm watching you, bro. Thanks so much for watching the show on YouTube, and be sure to go click that big red subscribe button and check out the other clips and full shows from Carving It Up Live, as well as our other incredible content creators here on the Grid Network.